Hey, everyone. Well, we're back. I'm super excited to be back with Heather Elder and Workbook and Dear Our Producer and bringing this webinar back online. We took a break because people were getting busy, but we're excited to be back and do some recapping and also talk about what marketing looks like right now. So I just want to take a hot second to thank Jim Hudak. He is the tech director at Workbook. He makes this happen and helps us out in a lot of different ways. So I always want to just go with big shout out to him. He's an unsung hero at Workbook, and it's always nice to have the opportunity to say thank you to him. So I'm just going to jump right in. I'd like to do introductions as people are filing into the room, I guess, our virtual space. I'd like to start off with Rami Mariex. Now, I said that really well in practice 2 minutes ago, and hopefully he will forgive me for butchering it just now. Outside of being a design hitter for dozens of top agencies and in-house creative teams over the years, Rami has mapped out his career in entertainment, advertising, and creative tech space. He is currently the lead creative director for entertainment marketing at Facebook, where he leads creative brand and content efforts across the globe, not globe, because that's not a word. Next up is Jason Lau. He is the executive producer at Giant Spoon. Jason has been a producer for 15 years. He's currently based in Los Angeles and works at Giant Spoon as the executive producer and oversees the content production group in Los Angeles. His list of clients have included Lexus, Ritz-Carlton, FlexJet. I'm going to stop because I'm just going to wreck it in about 5 seconds, but he's worked for a whole lot of great brands. Kimberly Nussbaum, she's the senior art producer at Upshot Agency. Kimber is a freelance art producer and photography producer in Chicago. Prior to going freelance, she was an in-house producer and studio manager for a tabletop and food photographer, Dave Giordano, for 4 years, and then as an art buyer for Ogilvy in Chicago for 5. Since going freelance in 2013, she's been fortunate enough to work with many of Chicago's top agencies. She was also the founder of the Art Buyers of Chicago's Club, which is a fun quarterly gathering of art buyer colleagues for cocktails, camaraderie, and networking. Since April 2019, she's been the senior art producer at Upshot Agency in Chicago. Londo Ettrick is the creative director at PayPal Creative Lab. Londo is a designer with 20 years experience across an array of disciplines. He's currently the ECD for PayPal Creative Lab, and I'm unlucky enough to have met him many, many years ago, and I get to call him my friend. So I'm so excited that you're here. I'm excited you're all here, by the way. And then Emily Hoskins, Alan Katana is an integrated producer at McCann Health Echo. He's an integrated producer in New Jersey. He's been with Echo for 3 years, having previously worked in the TV news industry. He's a huge fan of natural lighting and all things water photography. And he has a real soft spot for product and still life photos too. Emily Hoskins is a senior producer at The Designery. Emily I'm sorry, I'm going to say the same thing again, which is silly. She's at The Designery in Long Beach, California, where she works with clients like Subaru, Infiniti, and Nissan. She worked with clients like New Balance, Corona, Nike, IBM while producing for agencies in Chicago. She's also spent time as an agent and an advocate for photographers and directors on the rep side of the business, and currently applies that experience to her agency productions. She has a fine art degree in photography, and she's been cartwheeling the finish lines of Ironman triathlons and marathons for the last 10 years. Wowza. And she'll be returning to Africa to add Kilimanjaro to her collection of endurance sports. Well, that is super impressive. Hats off right there. And then I'd like to go to my friend Heather Elder. Heather has been an agent for over 20 years. She hosts Dear Art Producer podcasts, writes a blog about the industry, and hosts the site for freelance art producers. Mostly though, she's always thinking ahead, and what better time to be doing that than now. Welcome. And then me, I've been working with Workbook for the last 6 years. Before that, I was with APA Los Angeles. But wherever I've been, I get the pleasure of being supportive to my clients, and I want to be a supportive force in their businesses, and that suits my personality, and their successes are my successes, and now that's more critical than ever. So yay, panel. I'm so excited that you're here. I'd like to jump right in and do a little bit of a recap, really. It's been a minute since we've been broadcasting, and so a lot has happened since we were last talking. And so my biggest question is, you know, what's happening in production right now? So I'd love to start with Emily. You know, have you produced anything yet?
Well, we have a few things going on. Also, Heidi, Heather, all you guys, it's so nice to be here. Thank you for including me. Kimber, I miss you, girl, in Chicago. We've been trying to produce, I mean, we've been producing since March and everything happened. I think now we're kind of working up towards on-location productions, which is, I think, what we're really curious about. And we've had a little grab bag of successes and not successes as we've been going. And a lot of them, the ones that have gone off, one of our producers just wrapped a shoot last weekend, and we had really good feedback from client and everyone who participated. It was a smaller footprint, it was remote approvals, and we had really great feedback from client and agent and account who remoted in for approvals and just check-ins throughout the day, which was, I think everyone was surprised and delighted considering the circumstances. On the other hand, we had a production that canceled after it was awarded because client budgets got cut. So I think that's on the two extremes, but when they happen, they are happening with caution and with intention, and they are moving a little bit slower than we have in the past, which I don't think is a bad thing. But then there's these wild cards that happen, like you get canceled after you get an award. So, and that was directly related to budget cuts on the client side that we had to react to, but that, you know, we were already awarded and in motion a little bit. So I'm wondering maybe what Kimber's experience has been, because I know what she's working on over there. And I wonder if you have similar or different experiences with the productions you have.
Yeah, thank you. And again, thank you, Heather and Heidi and Jim, for having all of us. Emily used to be at Upshot many moons ago. We have had 3 successful photo shoots in the past month. One of them was small and run and gun. The other 2 are larger. Thankfully, they all went off without a hitch, essentially, pretty well. But we did have one shoot that literally canceled. It was scheduled for March 20th and got killed on March 17th or 18th because at that time the world was shutting down. We were hoping just to make it home from the office in time to not be hit by whatever was out there. Like, nobody knew what was happening. So this photo shoot in particular has kind of sat for a few months and has gone through many iterations in terms of what can we do, what can't we do, what if we don't do a bunch of people and have all that to deal with, you know, all the large crews and whatever, like what can we do? So now, honestly, it's pretty much come down to the idea that the client has to now cut the budget. So a PO that was issued now has to be cut down to whatever we sent them for the advance is our budget now. So we had to rework things. It became a photo video shoot to now just a photo shoot. And we're hoping to get that on the books in the next week or so. We're finalizing stuff with the client on Tuesday. So it's been a wild ride, and people are really pretty good with being, you know, at the ready on Zoom to make approvals. Clients, in my experience, have been really attentive and really understanding. So it's just been crazy. Like, who knew in February that this was happening? So anyway, I'll stop talking. So
no, one of the greatest things about this webinar is that we get to listen too. And so I could listen to you guys all day. But I did notice that, Rami, that you were really nodding when Emily was speaking earlier. I wonder if you might want to sort of weigh in on this.
Yeah, I think for us, we are at Facebook, we're doing, I mean, dozens and dozens of shoots in any given moment is normally how things are going. With the COVID-19 restrictions and just the safety issues in general, we've leaned into remote, and we've leaned into things that might be more like motion based, or they may still have elements of photography and videography and filmmaking, but they might be like limited shoots around those things that are then amplified by like illustration and motion graphic design, and that kind of stuff.
I was just going to ask how illustration has factored into this.
Yeah, I mean, we've leaned into illustrators for sure and motion design artists. I think for us, just as a brand, we're obviously a brand about people. So it's hard for us to just completely dip entirely into motion design or illustration, because you kind of lose the humanity of it in some ways. But I will say that I've done at least one major remote shoot that was, you know, like a 6 or 7 day shoot. It was shot with probably 20 different members of the crew, members of talent around the US, and it was all shot in people's living rooms. We basically sent, you know, shooting kits to these folks, and everything was basically done through a very complex like Zoom setup. And honestly, it came out amazing, way better than I would have expected. I kind of expected it to crash and burn, if I'm being honest, but I think that's a reality. And I think for us, a lot of the conversation now is just about flexibility in our creative concepts and being very clear on what we're trying to message, so that we're not tripped up by the specifics of a production execution, and we're more focused on like what we're actually trying to produce at the end. And that the production realities may force us to change how we get that message across, but we don't want to be in a situation where we're actually just not producing anything because we're paralyzed.
Remy, I have a question for you. Is that okay, Heidi, if I chime in? So are you talking to your photographers or directors, say, while you're concepting, so that you don't get tripped up in production, or are you just kind of figuring that out along the way?
Yeah, I think we've actively tried to break down any barriers, both between our partners outside of Facebook and our partners inside of Facebook. So when we're actually in the concepting phase with either our internal teams or with a creative agency, we will definitely, if we know that we have someone in mind for a piece of work, we'll pull them in as quickly as possible. Because obviously, if you could have a bunch of like art directors and writers and copywriters from an agency come up with all kinds of just insane ideas that are completely unexecutable, and we're trying to avoid situations like that. So if the more narrow we can focus in the production realities, the better. That said, I don't think it's a good idea just moving forward, because we don't know really how long this is going to go on, to pigeonhole ourselves into like 1 or 2 different ways of working. Meaning I would probably reluctantly do another shoot with us sending like kits to somebody's home so they can shoot in their living room, because we already did it.
Right.
But I do think that, you know, us understanding that this is not a temporary situation. And I think, you know, 2 or 3 months ago, people would have assumed that that's the case. I think it is a fairly permanent situation. And I think in a way, it's a really good thing for the industry, because we've always been so reliant on physically being present to produce anything. And I think the reality, especially on a global scale, is that's both not necessary and not actually in the best interest of anybody.
Londo, I saw you nodding along here too. I wondered if you might want to weigh in, and I want to get to Alan and Jason too. You guys, like, it's like I'm a kid in a candy store. I can't wait to hear what everybody's saying.
Sorry about that. I was on mute. Once again, thanks for having me, and Emily, thanks for making me feel horribly inadequate about myself with all the triathlons you do. Remy, I gotta say, there's an awful lot of consistency with what we've been going through to what you're saying, right? our biggest takeaway has been that you simply need to maintain a level of flexibility, because we don't know what the elements are going to be, because things have shifted day to day, week to week, project to project. And you can't walk in with some sort of rote plan about how we always do things. We just have to figure out what we're going to do and how best to execute it. So I really like what you said about starting with that kind of creative constraint of what the production capacity is. That's a really great way to have people thinking at the edges of the box and being really smart about what they do.
I forget about unmuting myself. I'm sorry. So Jason, what's your experience been over at Giant Spoons?
I mean, the good thing is we've been busy, probably the busiest I've ever been in my entire career, which has been really, really great, but also wanting to kind of go a little insane. I've hired 2 freelancers while in quarantine, so we've been busy. But we were fortunate enough to have a number of jobs in CG and visual effects. So we do both photography, illustration, and TV. So there's a mixture of work. We've leaned towards a lot towards CG, visual effects, and illustrations and motion graphics. But to the point of being on set and not being on set, I think it depends on a case-by-case situation. I think, at least from any of the TV stuff, we haven't had any shoots that had any lines. So it's been mostly all vignettes. We don't have to be there to really listen to the dialogue. We've had photography shoots where, we used Heather's resource, where, we had the idea of like what house or space they have, what talent they have available to them. And we did a number of shoots where we had a number of check-ins throughout the day. It's worked out pretty good. The only thing I would say is about the efficiency of things. I think people are more apt now to, if they don't get it right the first time, they'll have a second day to kind of redo it. It'll be interesting to see what that does in terms of production expenses, because, the assistants are the assistants, but the ones who are super more flexible are the ones who are getting more as a project fee. So they're more flexible with that. But I think overall, it's interesting to see how this will affect our shoots moving forward. Really how necessary is having 20 people from the agency to be there? Do all of them really need to be there? And how long? So it'll be interesting. It's worked out well for us for right now. But again, I think it'll be a different story if we had to listen to, people speak. That I think will be a different scenario. But yeah.
I want to go to Alan now to weigh in a little bit on the same, what your experiences are right now. Are you doing same in terms of production? Are you not?
Yeah, so we actually started producing. We were concepting something in January, February. So I started putting together a list of vendors to execute right before we went remote. So it would have been a photography CGI mix, and I had a bunch of photographers on the list, which right after we went remote and COVID hit and everything got shut down, I kind of switched over because we went from doing a shoot with CGI elements to creating people fully out of CGI. So we worked with a vendor and they used models to create, but then they had a digital illustrator that can do photorealistic illustrations that really like sold it and hammered it home. It's a little bit different, and we were a little hesitant at first because CGI, full CGI people never really quite looks right. But it looked really great. The clients were really, really excited about it. They loved it. They thought it was really cool that we were doing it. And it really went off really well. It's not your typical thing, but it worked for what we needed it. I don't know that we would do it again going forward once COVID is over. But it's nice to know that it is possible to do something like that. We have a couple other things in the works. Who knows if they're going to be able to go off like we expect them to. Because I mean, no one knows what the state of the world is going to be like in the next couple of months. So
oh, I think I unmuted I don't know what I just did, but so I had this question about treatments, and has that changed for you? You know, Remy, you were talking about bringing people in more in the concepting. I said your name wrong, Remy. But in the concepting process, does that, like, how has this changed treatments? How has this changed treatments? Would you maybe weigh in on that for me?
Yeah, I think treatments are still important at a phase where we're kind of finalizing in some ways what it is that we're actually doing. I think bringing in an artist on, or anyone like on earlier in the creative concepting process, part of our decision making around that is the previous work that they've done, and probably in some cases their reputation. Because if we really can't bring in somebody super early when we don't, and tell them to treat against something we don't know what it is. But I do think, you know, if we feel comfortable we're dealing with a professional and like somebody that's actually legitimately going to help us make better work, I don't think any of us we're pretty low ego, at least within our organization. So I don't think any of us have a problem with someone coming in and providing new ideas. And especially now, one of the big things that we're doing is trying to throw as many ideas against the wall as possible and not get attached to single like big concepts that we might have been like, we're going to make this one thing and we're going to fight our way through to make sure it gets done exactly the way we see it. We don't really look at it that way anymore. It's more, like I said, trying to find a center of gravity about what the message we're trying to portray is, and make sure that we get to that point regardless of what changes in the production or how things need to like flex to fit the realities of the world.
I would add, Heidi, that, you know, one thing that we're doing in our group, and I know a lot of other reps are doing it as well, in terms of our treatments, is really making sure that we communicate that we've done this before, that we've created content within these COVID restrictions, and all the guys in our and women, the artists in our group, have done test shoots and proof of concepts that show that they can do it in the studio, they can do it on location, and they can create content, and they show what it is that they've created underneath these conditions. So when you ask if our treatments have changed, I mean, obviously that is being added to our treatment, because if we're on the table next to two other photographers and they haven't tested this out yet, we might rise to the top being able to share that we can do that. And on top of that, we're sharing all of our, you know, everybody for the last 3 months has been working on their safety protocols and what that looks like. So all of our producers have that information, as do we. So we're kind of adding that to our treatments as well. Oh, you're on mute.
Can I add to that? A lot of photographers have sent me emails with, you know, this is what we're doing and this is what we shot while, you know, producing in place, and that's sheltering at home and that sort of thing. And that's been really cool. But a couple of photographers have also invited me and my motion partner at Upshot to join in on basically fake or test shoots that they've been doing, and they've invited us to Zoom in. So we started doing that even before we were putting up any shoots, and it was so great to understand, like, to be on Zoom and to watch them and see how things were happening. And granted, it was a test shoot, but to have that viewpoint going in and then putting up another shoot, it was like, okay, team, just so you know, this is going to happen and this is going to happen and this may not happen, but you know, all kinds of things were. So it was really cool to see test shoots happening before we even started producing stuff on our own. It was a huge learning experience to let them be the guinea pigs, and then we could just take and learn from that for our own productions.
I think that's really smart. I mean, that photographer was really smart.
And it was a great, sorry to interrupt you, but it's also a great promo thing for them, because it was like, oh, never heard of this person before, but I'm going to spend an hour with her and her crew. And I'm like, oh, I'm going to add her to my list. So a really smart marketing ploy.
Really, really, yeah, 100%. So that really kind of takes me to the next sort of area in terms of, you know, you're kind of talking about that helped you manage what, you know, can and cannot be done, right? Does anyone else have an experience that's similar to that? Jason, maybe?
I think it's about communication, right? So I think that's going to put the ease with agency folks and clients is about how we communicate and how we're setting things up. I think we're all in a kind of a situation where, you know, we want to make things, but knowing that, you know, we're used to being on set for a while, leading up to that is about how you communicate and how you have what that game plan is. Because usually, typically, I mean, anything that we're doing now, production-wise, I'm like, do we have a very clear plan of exactly what we're doing? Whether it's we're checking in at, you know, such and such hour to go over wardrobe and makeup and all that fun stuff, and then we go through, you know, we wait another couple of hours and we check in on the setup and stuff like that. So I think it's really about how you guys, how artists kind of plan and be a little bit more forthcoming of like, this is what we're going to do, and making our job a little bit easier instead of pulling that information from you, even though that's what we do and what we love doing. But that just gives another, you know, another star on you. If you're just like, this is how we're going to do it. I have a POV and this is how it's structured, and bam. And that just goes really a long way, because we're dealing with obviously a bunch of other stuff, and then to do it remotely, and not be there where it's usually much more efficient, I think goes a long way in terms of like planning ahead and having a POV before the job even starts.
Emily, I see you nodding a lot. I'd love for you to weigh in over there.
Yeah, I think it's an extension of what Jason, Kimber, and Heather are saying. It's a way to showcase how you are interpreting these COVID guidelines. And if you can bring an art producer in earlier, even when it's not your shoot, if it's a test shoot, to interpret how that team is creating a safe space and allowing you to be a part of it remotely, that's a huge solution. It's a huge problem solved that we haven't experienced before. And in theory, we're talking about this working, but in practice, maybe you hadn't had an experience yet. So you can do it in this really safe environment where there's no expectations attached to it. You can, and then I'm sure Kimber was able to bring that to her team and describe what that experience was like, to say, hey, these guys have a solution, this is how it's going to work. And then to Heather's point, bringing those people in with those solutions before we have ever, getting them involved in not only like creating, but developing concept. To Rami's point, we can create in this bubble all we want, but without knowing what's executionable, how are we going to follow through on that? And the way the vendors interpret those COVID-19 guidelines helps us not only craft the creative project, but then share that with our teams and then kind of create appropriate work that contains us in this box, but allows us to kind of push to the outside of what's possible with any given vendor, because everyone's going to interpret these a little bit differently depending on if they're a studio photographer or a location photographer.
And I would add to that so much of what I'm hearing from the art producers and the clients directly is the idea of risk assessment. So before they even decide that, I mean, they may love the concept and they might have the money to produce it, but if they feel that it's too risky, they aren't going to take the chance, because we all know that we don't have any lifelines here and there's not any protection for any of us while we're out there from a liability point of view, or we can't assure that no one's going to get sick. We don't know what people are doing when they're not on set. I mean, there's a lot we can do to make the set as safe as possible. So I'm hearing a lot about, we might creatively figure out how to execute the production, but if the powers that be decide that it's too risky, it's going to not happen. So we need to make sure that we're following all the county guidelines, we're following what happens, and it's changing by the second, and we're, you know, really on top of that for our clients, because the job won't get approved, or it'll get approved and then it'll get canceled.
That's a really fair point, and it kind of brings me into our next topic area, which is, how can people market to you guys right now? Like, what's going to get through? What are do's and don'ts? I'd love to go to Alan and ask, sort of start off that section, which is, are you, and this is a question that's actually live as well, which is, are you trying out new people, or are you using people that you have experiences with prior when you're thinking about artists for any of the upcoming jobs that you were you get it, go.
Well, the vendor that we worked with for the campaign I was talking about, we had bid with them a couple times, but it never worked out for one reason or another. So in a way, they were new to work with, although I have known about them for a while. A couple of the other stuff that we have been working on or will be working on, we're working with people that we haven't worked with before. And I generally like to change it up as much as I can, because there's so much talent out there, and it's nice to be able to work with new people. And it kind of, everyone does something a little bit differently, and everyone has a different personality. So, I mean, even something as common as like lifestyle photography, that there could be 100 different photographers that do it. Each person does it a little bit differently, and I like to just change it up a little bit as much as I can. In terms of marketing, I've been getting a lot of email stuff. A lot of them, though, from people that I already know. My go-to usually actually is Instagram. I use Instagram a lot to follow artists, photographers, illustrators, reps, whoever, really. And I think it's a good way to be as up-to-date as possible with everybody. And I know a couple of photographers do like the Instagram live events where you can like tune in and just watch them, and they talk for a little bit about whatever it may be. And those are always really good too. So.
Mute, unmute, mute, unmute. So is anybody getting, anything in their emails that is unique and different, and any outreaches that are really grabbing your attention? Londo, I want to go to you. You're muted.
Thank you. It was my turn. Outreaches that are really grabbing my attention, there's no particular marketing. I think kind of similar to Alan, a lot of the people that I've been interested in lately, or the people that I've found lately, have been a combination of finding a project that really inspired me, and then I'll find them on Instagram to see what they're doing. I also use Instagram a lot to find people. There have been people that I found, including some through Workbook, that I have a relationship with, or I know their style and it applies to something. Because, veering off to a slightly different point, somewhere in between a point made by Alan and Rami is kind of where I've been. We are also a people company in a different way. We perform a utility for folks. So these stories very much have to be slightly different, but a form of uniformity to it. And because of that, we are constantly looking for a slightly different POV on a lifestyle shoot, a slightly different take on capturing a moment between two people at a moment of transaction, for instance, right? So I don't know that I can be attracted to something, or I'm going to say it the other way. I'm constantly looking for something, and that sort of curiosity leads me to looking everywhere. What I'm finding works best is showing off your work. And for that, I don't think that there's any better place than Instagram. It's kind of what the new portfolio is going to be, because it's portable. We all have access to it immediately. And it is a way to constantly update and refresh work that includes stills and video.
Can I piggyback off of that? We're looking at a photo shoot that's coming up now, and I have a wish list of not a wish list, a list of people of suggesting, and one of them was someone I was suggesting to was someone that the clients used rounds and rounds before, and I looked at their website. I'm like, I don't think they're right for this, but I went to their Instagram, and I was like, holy cow! Like, he could absolutely be a contender. So it's so interesting what you see on Instagram versus what might be on their site. And maybe they could consider, well, putting the Instagram button on the site for sure, but maybe having a section like on Instagram, or I don't know.
more of a mirror between the two
Yeah.
places.
So you can be like, oh, wait, yeah. Because otherwise, had I not gone to Instagram just on a fluke, never would have seen what that person was capable of. So.
And you know what the hard, sorry, I don't mean to talk over you, but the hard thing about that becomes that I think that we've all grown accustomed to seeing work in a certain way, so we can dive right into the details of the art direction and the storytelling and the photography. But one of the great things that's kind of happened by default by this is that when I'm looking at something on a 1-to-1 ratio on a tiny screen, this is the format that we're going to see it in. So there's a relationship there that helps me get past all these other sacred cows that I have and how I'm analyzing work, right? And getting right down to an immediate, like, sort of like, yep, that's the right shooter. This is the right style. Let's build a case for that.
I have a question for the group. Being a rep, part of my job, and a big part of my job for the last 20 years has been traveling around and showing portfolios and hosting portfolio shows. And even before COVID, that has evolved some, and I've been doing things a little differently in addition to the portfolio shows. But I'm wondering, Kimber, I know you're doing something because we've been talking, and I've actually got something really cool to show you later. But I'm wondering what you guys are thinking about that for the future, or at least the immediate future or the near future. How are you looking at work besides, I know Instagram is one of them, but are you hosting some sort of virtual events for reps and photographers and directors and illustrators to be able to show you their work where they would do that in person, or how are you staying connected? And Kimber, maybe you can talk to what you guys are doing at Upshot, because it's
cool. Yeah. So when we first went into lockdown, I was picking themes for the week and saying, okay, this week will be food, and this next week will be beverages, and next week I did a whole scan of photos that were taken from an aerial view of like the beautiful, our world, our earth. And then I started reaching out because I'm like, we've got to figure out how to get artists in that, just have portfolio shows. And I knew that my agency tends to be super busy, thank goodness. And I knew that I was not going to be able to get them on a large Zoom call to do a virtual portfolio show with, however you guys do it. And to be honest, we're on so many Zooms and Teams, like I didn't feel right to subject them to another hour on screen. And it's hard enough to get people to portfolio shows anyway sometimes because of schedules. So it was like, well, I wasn't there to like corral everyone. So I started approaching reps and said, this is what I want to do. I want to offer you like an email that comes out from I have an email specifically set for portfolio shows. So it doesn't come from me, it comes from the portfolio show email. And like, if you had an email, what would you do to have a portfolio show via email? Because I don't know when we're going to be able to have you in the office. And we've had some pretty cool stuff so far. The person that's doing something, the rep, by the way, Heather is our rep in September, I think. So we're looking forward to that. But in August, the rep is, excuse me, she has done short little interviews of her photographers, real short, because you want to keep their attention, real short, like introductions of their photographers. And then they're going to do a link to either their website will of course be their Instagram, hopefully, but just maybe their favorite images or whatever they decide to do, whatever they decide to show. I'm like, this is what I want to have happen. How would you make the most of this in lieu of a portfolio show? So really excited. I think people are really excited just to say thank you for continuing to think about this and continuing to allow new artists or new art just to come in so that we don't completely kill the idea of a portfolio show if we can't do like a Zoom call. So I don't know. So far, it's been pretty cool.
Sounds really cool. I mean, what a great idea. Emily, I see you smiling. Are you guys thinking along these lines as well?
I love Kimber for a lot of reasons, and that's one of them. And I'm very glad to hear that has been working out. We have been sharing resources that come into our inbox that are appropriate to the productions that we're trying to get into. So the things that I have found most helpful haven't been organizing portfolio shows, but have been those specific pieces of marketing that speak to exactly what we're doing. So things like, not dissimilar from what Kimber described, because these, the things that we find that are most helpful to share are kind of what Kimber described, in that the rep will send out a list of her photographers, a short bio, a quick image of something that was created in COVID, and then the approach, maybe what the footprint looked like or where it was shot or how it was shot, just a quick little couple lines on how they interpreted COVID and how they applied it to this shoot. And we can kind of share that as a resource to start wrapping our heads around what's possible now.
Heidi, you're on mute.
I know, like you'd think it would kick in at some point. So I was wondering if anybody else wanted to weigh in on this. I know Londo is doing a portfolio Zoom thing for me actually next week, and so I'm super excited to see how that's going to sort of work. Has anybody had experience with sort of the Zoom portfolio meeting? Because I do think it's a model that's coming or is already here. Remy, I see you nodding.
Yeah, no, we've already done a couple of those with individual artists and with you know, creative groups. They're obviously, I mean, I don't think anybody's like delusional about whether or not this is better than in person. I think everybody prefers in person, but in the same breath, I'd also say that this is probably a good thing in some ways, in the sense that there are possibly doors that open up on an international stage and just outside of like a geographic sphere that are going to be better for everyone. My team in general, when it comes to finding the right talent partner, we are always looking in the first place. And obviously we're Facebook, so we're all over the gram like all day long, and that's just a normal thing for us. And I think that one of the big pluses to having a well-structured and robust Instagram account is that we also get a little bit of a taste of how people react to your work, because that ultimately is kind of why we're choosing you in the first place. And we can get a taste of like what your actual style is, because the reality is we don't actually, at least from our org and our brand, we don't actually want a creative partner that is entirely commercial and doesn't actually have like an artistic POV on anything. I think we do want someone that understands the business side of it, understands like all the technical ins and outs of actually making something in a business for business reasons, but is also still actually trying to express something human. So I think Instagram gives you a lot of flexibility in that sense. I definitely think that there's value in having a portfolio site that's well structured and then goes kind of deeper. But if we're being honest, if I'm looking for a new artist, I'm probably gonna not spend more than 5 minutes on anything related to them, unless like something catches my attention and I really want to devote more time to it.
I said, wow, this is such a good answer. Thank you so much. I was wondering.
Can I ask a question? Remy, were you saying you were going to spend an artist like in terms of their work, or like in terms of like listening to them talk? Because I just want to state something. The reason that I think the idea of that person doing little videos of their people is really key is because what we're missing in not having a live portfolio show is getting to know the personalities to see if you even jive, which I think is huge. So I'm not saying you're right or wrong. I'm just curious. Like, I think by doing these little videos, that's like, or doing the portfolio shows by Zoom is like the best way to hopefully get to know the photographer and see if you even, you know, if their personality is someone you want to spend 8 hours a day with for 3 days. So
yeah, no, that's fair. I would say, at least from my end, the simple like practical reality is I don't have time. Like, time is by far the most valuable resource that I deal with. And I think most of the people that report to me are all senior creative directors at Facebook, and they all have the same problem. And all of our partners are like producers and so forth. So it's not a question of whether or not we would want to. Personally, I would love to spend like significant parts of my day looking at new people, meeting new people that I haven't. But the reality is I don't actually have time to do that. But I also have the requirement that I need to know what is out there. I need to know where the industry is going. I need to know who good partners are. So I think the video concept is good as long as it's very pointed and it's not like meandering, like 10-minute, art film. It's more like 30 seconds, a minute and a half, where it's very clear what this person is about. And I get a very good sense of like their working style, their professionalism, and what kind of person they are.
Sounds very much like creative speed dating.
It's a great way to put it.
Yeah. So, which is, we've done that in person and we're doing that virtually now. So I love all these answers and I really appreciate everyone, your candor. It's some of this is hard, but it's really important to know where you're thinking and what you're thinking. And I wondered, Alan, would you like to, sort of jump in on any of that?
Yeah, definitely. I agree with everything that was said. I know a huge reason of why we hire anybody is personality. Because like Kimber said, you don't want to be on set with someone for 3, 4, however many days, and it's just miserable for everybody. So really, personality goes a really long way. And also back to the Instagram thing, if you my computer dying. Sorry.
A little bit, Alan.
So really, personality goes a really long way. Sorry about that. Yeah, back to the Instagram thing. Another thing I'd love to see from artists is their personal work, things that are not restricted by clients or legal review or anything like that. I want to see what you're really capable of, what comes from your brain, more than something that the client forces you into.
Yeah, that's so spot on, man. If I can piggyback on that, I'll make another correlation. It's in the same way that you would be looking for a full-time job, or I would be looking to employ someone, what I would be looking for are those two functions. Because if we're looking to partner with someone, then I want to get a sense of how they're going to approach a project. I want to get a sense of how they're going to partner with us and their understanding of our confinements or constraints. And I want to get a sense of what they will bring to that is separate than anyone else, right? So for as much as personality factors into it, the other parts of it is like, how do you influence your work outside of how you're paying a bill? What do you consider craft and artistry and influence, and how can that shift maybe a little bit, right? This all plays right back into how you collaborate with someone.
Heidi, you're on mute.
At some point, Heather, I'll focus, right? I think we lost Kimber, but I'm hoping she's coming back. Oh, there she is. Hey. Okay, so I was going to sort of move on to, we've covered so much, what the audience can't see is that we have a nice outline here, and we've covered really so much of the conversation. And so there were some questions from the registrants when we started the process. And one of them was, are there any new protocols or releases crew or models need to complete? I think I want to go to one of our producers for this question. And Emily, any chance you jump into that?
Yeah, there's been a handful, I'm happy to answer that. There's been a handful of new protocols for crew and production and agency when we're going through rounds of negotiation and bids. A lot of things come up. The COVID specific ones are a COVID compliance officer, and I know Heather's been talking about this for a very long time, and that is on the responsibility of the production, but inside of our agency, there's been a lot of interest in getting certified ourselves, and while I don't think it's agency responsibility to enforce it, I think it's everyone's responsibility to know what those guidelines are so they can help remind everyone on set, just like a COVID compliance officer would. Some other things that we've been seeing is mandatory negative testing before anyone arrives on set. There are complications that come into play. We were talking about, are we using local photographers or out-of-state photographers? And that has kind of come into play when we're required to have a negative test before anyone arrives on location. That makes it a little bit harder for anyone who's traveling in, which has resulted in client and account people, just from our side specifically, participating remotely. So there was one other thing that I wanted to tell you about. Part of the negotiation process too is the COVID-19 guidelines. Where are your resources? How are you documenting them? How are you responding to them? And how does it apply to this job in particular? And when we go through rounds with a cost consultant, that's the part that they've been picking at specifically in a way that I haven't seen, which is great. Everyone needs to be very conscious of it, but it's very revealing to how those rules are interpreted and how they're applied to your specific production.
So somebody just actually jumped in from that question being, with regards to COVID compliance officers, are there any particular trainings or certifications that you would recommend or consider valid?
I've heard the OSHA training is great, user-friendly, and that's what a lot of people are doing. Our team is looking into something that works for us, and that's definitely on the list. I haven't heard of any other organizations by name that will certify you, but Lando looks like he might have. Were you nodding? No, he goes, no. Well, the OSHA one is the only one that I know of. So if whoever asked that question or anyone else knows, send it my way, because there's a handful of people at our agency looking to become certified.
I did it this time. Okay, so I wanted to ask the next question, and there's sort of one that's live and one was pre-registered, which is, are you awarding jobs to photographers locally, or are you open to hiring out-of-state photographers? Like where you're located, is that a factor at all now? I guess is really the question. Jason, I want to hear from you.
Yeah, yes and no. Mostly it's been wherever anyone's at. I think as long as people were more compliant, because I think it's state to state, city by city. So it doesn't for us really at all. I'm trying to think of anything, because it doesn't really matter really anymore whether or not we're traveling, because no one's really traveling. We just did a shoot, or we're in production right now where we're having one person who lives in Detroit, and they're doing a road trip because it conveniently, the photographer is doing a road trip and is going to the New York, New Jersey area because the other vendor or case study that we're doing is located there. So they're just kind of making a little trip out of the thing, kind of works out for us, but no one's in attendance to it. So it's not like we're hopping around and getting on a plane and there's a budget concern. So it doesn't really matter. I think it just depends on the situation that we're in. But yeah, being local to the area for us doesn't really make a difference.
So am I doing it again? Oh no, I'm here. Okay. So to piggyback on an earlier question and that question, which is, this is from Natter and it's live. To piggyback on what Tom said, are you making sure to include BIPOC and LGBTQIA plus artists to bid on projects and working with reps who have a diverse roster based on race and gender? I'm going to go to Rami because he started nodding first. So I'd love to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, for us, that's a pretty big thing. The people of color, Black people in at this moment is like voices we want to raise. LGBTQIA, women, those are all groups that we very strongly feel are underrepresented in our industry, and folks that we go out of our way. We've got pretty aggressive internal goals to have them very well represented in our work. So across the board, in terms of both the agencies that we have working on our projects and their teams, the actual creative partners like artists and producers that we bring on board, all of those across the spectrum are things that we consider part of a balanced, approach to honestly leveling the playing field.
I'm seeing Kimber, I know, right? I like Kimber's using my own signal. But perfect timing, because I was going to ask you, I noticed you nodding in this answer from Rami, and I wanted you to weigh in too.
I was kind of nodding and like, I get the importance of it. I'll be really honest, when I look for photographers, the color of their skin, the gender, the origin of their love interest, like that doesn't, for me, it's about what do they show in the photography? Have I met them before? Do I like could I imagine working with them? Like, as much as it probably I should be more aware of that. I'm just not. I will kind of pro my agency in the fact that our top people it's all female led. So that's something. And we're doing more as an agency to really pump up the knowledge and the sight on diversity within our agency and the BIPOC and the LGBTQ2 community. So we're aware of that as an agency, but as far as photography, like in my mind, it's about the art and what comes through. And a big bonus would be like if I got a Frank Ishman in or an Andrea Mandel in, that's even like the icing on the cake, but it really comes down to the photography for me and what they can execute for the content. So I could be more culturally aware, and I'll work on that for sure. But
well,
crosses my mind.
No, I appreciate your candor. And Londo, I see that you were nodding through most of that. I'd love for you to jump in with your thoughts.
So again, I think that I find myself between two answers. Rami is spot on equally. Our focus has been, because we are a utility, making sure that representation matters. And because that has been our focus, my interest is making sure that the people authoring the content, by that I mean the photographers, have the right sensibility. So there will be instances where it is very, very important to have a discussion with a Black photographer, because if it's studio portraiture, then there is a way that Black skin needs to be lit in order to really make it right, to put the beautiful touches on it. That might not be the sensibility of someone who's just used to at-large lighting. There might be a sensitivity to a story in the BIPOC community that would specifically make me look to a BIPOC photographer, but I don't know that I would be casting with a net to have a version of what sounds like a token system then, which is just that I want to get a gay person in to shoot because they're gay or a Black person in to shoot because they're Black. I think authorship matters because representation matters, right? Sensibilities matter, but they can also operate independent of one another, right? So to Kimber's point, the content focusing on that level of diversity is as important, if not more important, than the person shooting it, unless they're not getting it right.
I think that's really fair. And so I want to switch gears to another question that came in live. If photographers have been sitting on really nice promos from before the shutdown, are you open to receiving them? And if so, where could they be sent? Well, I don't think anyone's going to be handing out their home addresses in this second, but are you open to receiving those kinds of promotion pieces? I'm going to go to Jason because he just smiled so nicely when I asked the question. So I'm going to go to you.
Probably not at this point in time. I would just probably hold on to them until life gets a little bit better. Again, I mean, printed promos nowadays, I think, is a very difficult thing to whether or not you send them or not. I think I've said this before in the past, is anything with printed material, I think you really target who you send it to. A lot of the stuff that's in my house is stuff that's usually I've asked for or they've been given to me, which makes it much more special. I've got stuff from Doug Kirkland that are signed, and I love those, and those are like my prized possessions. So I think if you put any sort of investment in this sort of printed material nowadays, in my opinion, is having those connections, people that you network with. If someone is oozing over your work, spend that $100 or something and get them a nice Epson print on, you know, such and such paper. Cause I think that goes a really a long way. Cause everyone that I have in my house, you know, it may not pertain to clients I'm working with at the time, but trust me, if there's a moment in time where there's a time where their work is applicable, by 100%, I will give them a call and say, hey, I finally have a job for you. But in terms, I mean, our office space now it's a home. I don't have room to put little pieces of printed material. And even at the office now, you know, who knows when we go back to the office, if our workstations now are going to be a mobile spot. But I don't have a wall anymore. I used to have a giant, you know, quarter of an office space that I had like all my production books. There's no room for that anymore. It's all digital. So if you have them printed, hold on to them until there's a right time, and definitely target who you send those to, because otherwise it's sometimes a waste of change.
And I noticed, thank you, Jason. I noticed that Emily was like ready to chime in, so I want to hear what you had to say. Yeah.
I love what Jason said about the art in his house coming from photographers that he might not be able to give a job to right now. They're not necessarily promo items, but something that was really nice that I started engaging with right when this happened was art for assistance. I know Heather can talk to this way more, but it was an opportunity for me to kind of get those super specialized, limited run prints of photographers that you love, that you want to be receiving promos from. And then there was the element of giving back to their assistants and their crews in this time. And that's the work that I have framed from Dan Goldberg and Brian Vaughn Smith, and like the ones that were really exciting to be engaging with. It's a promo, but it's so much more.
100%. I got one of those myself, and you're right. That's a really good way to say that. So I'm just going to sort of go through the rest of some of the registration questions. You guys are so great, and then we'll start to wind this down. But one of the questions was, I was interested, what is the importance of having a rep? We're always asked this question, does it help you? Does it hurt you? And Heather, I think, you know, you are just a force of nature and probably the nicest person. So I don't think that it's necessarily, you know, directed towards you, but I would be interested in hearing, like, does that make it easier or harder given your various roles in the industry? Or do you exclusively go one direction or the other? I think I'm going to start with Alan on this one. I want to hear your voice. I haven't heard it in a minute. So,
I think in a way, and I hate to say this because it's not necessarily true, but I feel like having a rep kind of makes you more reputable as a photographer. Because if we're looking for someone to do a certain job, we want to know that they can actually do it. And I think having a rep kind of shows that you're in the loop of everything. You have done all these crazy big jobs, and you know that you can get it done. And I'm sorry if you can hear my dog barking.
I can hear your dog.
But also it's the benefit of, you know, like communicating it can be easier that way through a rep, because maybe the photographer's on a set, she's shooting, they're busy, they may be traveling, whatever it may be. And I think a rep is able to get you a response much quicker in most cases.
I want to ask though, would it dissuade, if someone didn't have a rep, would it dissuade you from being in contact if you know, were really about what they were doing?
No, not necessarily. I think if the work can speak for itself a lot of the time. And if we're really sold on the work, I won't hesitate to reach out and at least get to know the person and open up the conversation.
Jason, would you jump in on that too?
Yeah, I don't think it really makes a difference having a rep or not. I think, as Alan was saying, I think it's, you know, depending on the job, you know, there's a sort of confidence that you need in someone. And then just having a rep is someone who can basically vouch for that and then also be support if there's anything that ever goes wrong. In my career, I probably would say maybe a handful of photographers or artists were amazing in terms of how they dealt with at least the producer side, because there's conversations that we have between reps and or line producers that we wouldn't necessarily have with artists because we need them to concentrate on the work itself. And sometimes if they get flustered on the other business stuff, it kind of takes away from that. On the other hand, I think having a non-rep, sometimes the artist tends to have, I guess it's a case by case, the passion, behind the potential job. But yeah, I think it doesn't really, and it depends on the marriage between the artist and the rep is also a very important thing. That's sometimes we don't see. And sometimes I've dealt with artists who, who not necessarily they don't have the best rep, or they have a rep that, may seem like they're looking out in their best interest, but they may not be, because it wouldn't be. It's like, if I don't think they're having a conversation between the rep and the artist because the answer I'm getting seems a little ridiculous. So sometimes they don't see that. So as long as your marriage between you and your rep are amazing, I think it works well, because I think a rep also offers a lot of connection and insight of the industry. I said probably within my entire career, the way it's evolved from film to now we're in a pandemic, and how we deal with production now is different. And they can provide that insight of, as younger artists come up, they're not privy to that information and that evolution of the history of commercial work.
I'll get it at some point. So probably directly after this is over, by the way. My last sort of question, just to wrap this up, unless somebody else had something they wanted to mention. Heather, I feel like you were moving forward, like you might want to mention.
Oh, no. I was intently listening.
I know, right? This is the best thing about this, by the way. I'll get to silver linings in a second. But so here's my last question from the registration. What is the biggest challenge you are facing with COVID circumstances, and what's the best advice you have for producers? Emily, I'm gonna talk to you.
Sure. Is the question from a line production standpoint? What can you do to support the agency's creative efforts to execute a job?
Yeah.
Show me how you interpret these guidelines, and what are our contingency plans? We have our best intentions set forward, and they will fall apart. And when they fall apart, what do we do? Always have a plan B, and how are we navigating the needs of our production specifically inside COVID, and then what is our backup plan?
Alan, I want to go to you too.
Sure. I could say from an agency standpoint, and in my experience, I think one of the biggest difficulties we encountered early on was how to best execute something, especially before we could shoot, and thinking outside the box. But now I agree with Emily. I think it's just making sure you have as much information as possible about about anything really that could go wrong. Always be prepared for something and anything, because if it can go wrong, it probably will, especially in the times that we're in now. And there's a lot of stuff that we just don't know how to deal with now, that if we know that someone else has a solution for it, it puts us as an agency at ease.
I would add something to that in terms of advice. Producers are amazing. They're in this job because they're detailed, they're resourceful, they're nimble, they don't know how to say no. They always are looking for a solution. So it's in working within the COVID conditions, they'll figure that out. I do think though, everyone needs to be careful, photographers, illustrators, everyone right now too, not to take on too much. So we have all been such a well-oiled machine for so long, and we can multitask. But right now, you know, when you're in the middle of a production, a COVID production, like all hands on deck, that pre-pro time is like 10 times more than what you thought it would be or what you even estimated for. So if you're double booking yourself like you thought before, well, I've managed 3 shoots before, I can do that. Even from a photographer, like even within our group, we're talking about that. If you're fortunate enough to have multiple productions going or the opportunity to, you might want to just step back for a second, especially right now, because we're all pioneers. We're all figuring this out together. And if you take on too much, something might fall through the cracks and it's not worth it.
I was going to just, that's a really good point. Thank you for adding that, Heather. And I wanted to go to Kimber because I'm now watching her nod emphatically at everything that you just said.
Sorry, I tend to be very like, you know, like, yeah. And,
no, I like that.
I often don't have a lot to say.
For that
but I do agree with Heather, like, and Emily, I agree with all of you, but the points that Emily made about just, you know, show me what your backup plan is, because there's going to be, inevitably, there's going to be a change in something. Because like Alan said, we're all pioneering through this. We're all going through this for the first time. I think also to just be open to the change that's going to happen. Like if I come back to you and say, I don't have the money to continue with what we thought we were going to do, I have exactly what I gave you as an advance in March. Just go roll with it and just try to like put the ego aside and just be okay with it and say like, okay, it is what it is. I'm not going to take this as any hard feelings, any crush to my my kitty wants to be on set too. Just kind of go with it, because I'm getting heat from my people to like cut the budget. So just be malleable. What's the word? What's a better word? Be flexible. Be flexible. Nimble. And just know that nimble, and just know that it is what it is, and we're all just doing the best we can right now. So.
Nimble seems to be the word of the time. And by the way, don't ever apologize to me for having an expressive experience with me. I love that. And I'm watching all of you so that I think that's super important. So like never apologize for that. This really does take me to, because we've gone on a little bit longer today and I don't want to keep you guys all day, but it does take me to the way I always like to end these, which is silver linings. I don't know, I'm a Pollyanna. I like to, obviously it's a stressful time and there's a lot of weirdness, but if we can think of the things that have come out of this that maybe are good things, or silver linings to this. So I just want to go around and ask everybody what their silver linings are. And I'd like to start with Alan.
Sure. I think, honestly, the virtual portfolio showcases the innovation in different ways to connect with producer and artist and rep and producer and whatever it may be. Really does open a lot of doors. I forget who it was saying earlier, but a lot of the overseas stuff, like there could be photographers overseas that I will never meet. They won't have a chance to come to Jersey. Not that you'd really want to, but with the virtual showcases, they can get a chance to meet with me and the team and showcase their work. And now all of a sudden I have someone overseas that I would have never had an opportunity to meet with before.
That's great. I like that. I mean, nice that it's opened opportunities. And Jason, would you maybe go next for me?
Sure. I'd say the community has really come together with sharing information, because I think we're stuck in our homes and I felt like a veal for quite some time. And the banter that we used to have in the hallways to connect with our other coworkers was no longer around anymore. And then having another Zoom call and having a happy hour wasn't the same as, what we had beforehand. So I think the community across all production, from art producers to broadcast, I've been part of all of that, which has been really nice, and being able to share the information that people learning and people wanting to make stuff still. I think once the storm passes, I think our appreciation of our jobs and being on set and running around on set is going to be we're going to love that again, even though we want to tear our hair out sometimes. But then also on a personal level, my dog's 17 years old and I've gotten to spend every waking moment with her for the past 3 months. So that's been amazing as she sleeps right here. But yeah, I think the community coming together has been really great and nice.
So I'd love to go to Rami, and I think if you would go next for me.
Yeah, I think the silver lining here is that this is going to make our industry a lot better. The reality is this kind of flexibility, if you had pitched this as a concept a year ago, people would have laughed you out of the building. But now it's like a reality of every day. And I don't think even when this crisis is over that muscle will like go away. I think it'll give us a lot more flexibility, both on the client side and on the art side and the producer side, which is great. It'll ideally open up doors and kind of drag this industry more into the information age.
That was a good one. I want to go to Kimber.
I don't have anything brilliant to add. I mean, everyone has had some really awesome answers. I think for me, the fact that we're all going through this, even outside of the production world, is just the commonality that we all share right now. The inside jokes, the toilet paper jokes, the masks jokes, like all the BS that's happening right now is just, I mean, you just can't make this up. And for me, like every day, that's just like, what will they think of next? You know, and I just love it. I just love it all. And I'm like, and I'm kind of almost, I mean, granted, I've had my job all this time and I haven't lost anyone that I know and I've been healthy, thank God. But I kind of view this whole thing as like, what a freaking amazing learning experience, and just experience in general. Like this will go in the history books. I know I'm being woo-woo right now, but the whole thing is just amazing to me, and good and bad and sad and whatever, and happy, and it's just amazing. But the biggest thing I think is obviously being with our pets, our beloved pets, and connecting more to our families longer, and you know, having dinner with families. But nature itself has just, you know, they talk about how the canals in Italy have been cleared, and you're seeing porpoises and see, you know, like all of it is just, it's just freaking amazing to me. So thank you for listening to me be all woo woo, but it's sincerely how I feel right now. It's quite an experience. It's a wild freaking ride. I'll shut up.
No, please never do that, because I'm a woo-woo person too. I'm going to go to Emily now, though.
All right, I'll get woo-woo with you. It sounds like we're all describing something kind of similar, and if we're gonna conceptualize it, it's really revealing. And Heather has said this 100 times, and I will say it on her behalf. We were moving at a pace that was unsustainable, and it reveals opportunities for our industry. It reveals opportunities for us as individuals. It reveals what America is made of, and there are opportunities in all of those pillars to recognize, prioritize, and evolve in reaction to all of that.
And do better to our people, our mankind.
I don't think it could have been said better than that, Emily. I think that was really great. I want to go to Londo next, and then we'll round it out with with Heather.
So I'll start with the low point. I'm starting to understand, Heidi, that we really aren't friends, that you keep putting me behind Emily when she's impressing the hell out of everybody like that. On a might seem a little obsequious. I think on a personal note, I remember writing a Facebook post. I do it at the beginning of every year, right? Every Auld Lang Syne. I sort of reflect on what has happened and what I want to do for the next 12. And when 2020 came in, I couldn't help but realize there's 2020 attachment to vision. So two things about that. One, obviously, no one could possibly have seen this year coming. So it has made me look at the way that I create personally a little differently. And I think certainly everyone has reflected that in the same way in their answers, which is we can't have this expectation of this script that's hard and fast of what we want to happen we have to, it works closer to an outline. We have this loose idea. We collaborate with people. We allow their input. We allow all of that to be shifted a little bit by the environment and whatever constraints we have, but we push forward. I think that getting that back has given me a different take on how to do things better. I think that the limitation of not having to rush to the office every time so I can go faster and do more has made me take a breath and recognize that the biggest commodity that I have in terms of me being a very good creative or wanting to be a very good creative is the luxury of boredom and time, and maximizing that as much as I can. Spending it with the animals and people that make me the happiest, and recharging as much as possible when I do. And trying, you know, to live by the hard and fast rule of don't be a jerk, you know, just what can I contribute and how can I do that with a little bit of grace as I'm endeavoring.
That was beautiful. You forgot the part where you're super happy that I now can pronounce your name, which I have done on this one. Poor Rami he's going to have that hope for the next time, I hope. But you're set. Let's move to Heather. I'd love to hear. We haven't heard this from you in over a month, so I'm interested if what you have to say today.
Emily said exactly what I've always said, is that we were operating culturally, professionally, personally at a clip that just wasn't sustainable. And I really, in the beginning, when we started doing these webinars and, you know, all the other stuff that I've been doing, I've always said, like, I want to come out on the other side of this a better person, professionally, culturally, personally. And, you know, when I first said it, who knew what that would be? And here we are, I don't even know how many months now, 4 months in, you know, I can look back and say, like, I've changed and the people around me have changed. And I think it has been for the better. And I don't want to say that bring on the pandemic, because we could, you know, we all needed to change. But if we have to look for a silver lining, so many people are taking advantage of the time that we're in to become better people. And, you know, we just have to keep moving in that direction and just continue to be kind and be there for each other in so many different ways. So.
Well, thank you. Always eloquent and right to the point. And I couldn't agree with you more. Mine have changed, not a lot, a little bit. My silver lining is always this, that I get to have these conversations. And, you know, being on a call with Londo last night for an hour, you know what? He and I have not been in the same city in over 5 years. We haven't done that in a really long time. It was amazing. Like that's something I wouldn't have done if this hadn't happened, you know. We've talked about it, but we hadn't done it. And you know, having this where we have this space to have these conversations, that's a gift. And then just on a personal note, my 16-year-old who doesn't want me to hug him anymore, we've been having lunch every day together. And so I know that I'm going to look back on this time when he's going to be gone in just a few years. And I'm not going to cry, although I might. But, you know, I know I'm going to be looking back on these simple intimacies in my family that I get to have. And I'm grateful for that. But I'm also exceptionally grateful that for my health and, you know, and that no one I know is sick. And I know that's not the case for everyone. And so, you know, no disrespect to that. But there are these silver linings that I think Kimber said the word that I love is that we're having this commonality right now that puts us in a space where we really all understand. And the one thing I hate is I'm done with dishes. I'm just going to say that now. If I see another dish, I'm going to break someone, like not okay. But okay. So just to keep it on the good ending, I don't think I could be more pleased with a panel. I say that after every panel because I think people who give us their time like this are probably the most generous people on the planet. You all have fall into that space, and that you answered us and that you were willing to give up your time today means such a great deal to me, and I know it means a lot to Heather too. So just thank you. And so here's the awkward end where we all wave, and then I hit leave, and then it all stops. So everybody give a nice wave goodbye, and thank you so much.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks all. This was great.
Thank you.